Symptoms ADHD, there's a plethora. And if you or your kid are more a hyperactive type, it's interesting that when you have low neurotransmitters, you do things to increase that sense of neurotransmission. And for example, let's give a real case scenario. You see your kid in a playground and your kid is just quietly sitting there, and another kid is constantly pestering your son, right? They're just constantly poking them or pushing them. They're literally irritating them. And eventually, your kid gets pissed off, tells that kid to stop it, or you do, and they stop it and they kind of smile. And that is because you just gave that kid what they were looking for. So when people have ADD or ADHD type symptoms, they're going to do things which try to increase their neurotransmitters. So yelling at a kid who is struggling is the worst thing that you can do, because short term, you're going to feel better by yelling. Short term, they're going to be upset that you yelled at them. But about 20 minutes later, they're going to feel better because you gave them that surge of dopamine and that norepinephrine, which they were looking for. And they will unconsciously seek that. So, understanding how neurotransmitters work, you are in control of, for the most part, of how neurotransmitters in your brain are acting. You have to understand these only about 5 things with neurotransmitters. They have to be made, they have to be released, they have to be activated, they should be reabsorbed back in your brain. And why is that? If you reabsorb a neurotransmitter and you pull it out of the active area of your brain, it gets stored back in a vesicle. It is very energy efficient. Imagine if you turn on your light in your house, and then if you turn it off, it blew up. And every time you'd have to replace the light bulb. That's a huge amount of resources that are required, and it's a big waste. So your body is brilliant in that it knows it requires a significant amount of resources to make neurotransmitters. So then it stores them once they are made for instant release and activation. So, get scared, you can take off with your norepinephrine and adrenaline. And if you're trying to learn something, you'll have a release of dopamine. So it's instantaneous. So reabsorption is a key part of neurotransmission. And you're going to see that that is a primary target for a lot of medications as well. Medications. And the statement that I have here on the bottom of the slide is very, very important. Take this home with you and remember this. Any medication that your doctor prescribes you, you can type that in Google and then you add 3 words: mechanism of action. Example, Adderall, mechanism of action. The mechanism of action of Adderall is to slow dopamine and norepinephrine from being pulled out of the brain. So a lot of people are interested in genetics, and it makes sense as to why. Because if you understand that you have a certain genetic variation like DRD2 or COMT or MAO-A, and it's genetically programmed a certain way, you want to know that because it's extremely important information. And then you can modify your lifestyle, diet, environment, and so on, and your medications and your supplements according to that. So if your production is too slow, you can enhance it. If the reuptake is too fast, you can slow it down. If the breakdown is too fast, you can slow that down. If there's poor receptor binding, you can enhance receptor binding. A lot of people understand if you take 5-HTP, okay, 5-HTP supports my serotonin levels. Well, not entirely. Choline, if I take choline, that'll support my acetylcholine levels. Not entirely. If I take tyrosine, that will support my dopamine and norepinephrine levels. Nope, not entirely. And if you do respond to those things very well, that's great. But you also have genetics which have given you the ability to perform that way. This is a slide from StrateGene. You order StrateGene, you get something that looks like this. Yes, this is me, right? So this is my StrateGene report. So I have an increased ability to synthesize L-DOPA because this gene, if you look at the key down here, is fast. So I have a faster ability to make dopamine. Well, how fast? So according to the research, it's modestly upregulated This one shows I have increased sympathetic activity. And this one shows I have 130% with transcriptional binding, 130% increased sympathetic activity compared to typical. Wild type means typical, no genetic variations. So when I get stimulated, I make a crap ton of dopamine quickly. And that's pretty accurate. For me, for taking a dopamine reuptake inhibitor is probably not the primary target that I need to focus on because my genetics for it are already slow. But look at my dopamine receptors. My dopamine receptors are also not very sensitive. So maybe having something that prevents the reabsorption of dopamine out of my brain because I have not very sensitive dopamine receptors in my brain, maybe that would help me. But I would say probably not because I have very fast breakdown. We've got a lot to cover, and that's why the Shy membership is so good because we have a lot to cover and there's going to be a lot of information for you.